It's David Ducker coming back at you, and today we're going to be talking about faction creation. So, how do you create all of these different factions, which will eventually make up your political web? And I talked about political web in its own video, but this is a little more granular, a little more detailed. So, basically, you need to go through and decide, what are my factions going to be? So, run down your basic list, which is the exact same list that I use for building the culture in the first place. So see my building cultures video on that. But basically you have the government who's in charge, the military who has the martial power, and that could be the police internally or the army externally. Now, of course, the government could have multiple levels as well. You could have a senate and a parliament and a president and a king. Or any one or two or even more than that. So the government, the military, the religion, and that could be, again, one church, it could be multiple churches, it could be one church with multiple gods or schisms, heresies, cults, anything like that, your spiritual health and well-being. It could be monasteries, it could be Shaolin priests, kung fu monks, anything like that. That deals with the spiritual well-being. Your economy. In some areas, there might be guilds and crafts people all over the place organizing these powerful institutions. In some areas, your economy might be very simple, it might be very primitive. You're doing a Bronze Age city-state, like there's a bunch of guys there, but they're not really organized compared to modern times when you've got mega corporations to deal with, or future tense where you have cyberpunk mega corporations which are almost their own nation states, depending on your setting. And you've also got to deal with the criminal element. Again, that could be very minimal or could be, very dangerous. You could have competing gangs, gang wars in the same city, in the same nation. Then you have your technology. Who is the cutting edge? That could include magic or miracles as well. So again, they could be part of the economy, part of the military, part of the religion, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're their own thing. That could be the one guy, the maverick, who's not included with anybody as an organization, but he's tremendously powerful. Whether that's the greatest hacker in the world, or whether that's a mage off in the woods, a hermit in a wizard tower, whatever it is. So go down your list, decide what factions you need based on your setting, your story, and your team. Who are the players going to interact with? Who's going to actually be doing things in your story? And who's really important to your setting? Okay, so my example here is going to be for To Another Shore, which is our Blue Planet space western cyberpunk campaign. So going through making our factions up. The government and military are basically the same thing. That's Earth Force, the Terran Republic, because this is the Outer Rim territory. So there's not much of a local government. I believe I did make a mayor's office, but they're very subservient to Earth Force. They really, the local Earth Force governor, I believe is a Commodore, he's the real power. Now he's also the military, although I did make a police force as well. And for the military, I made two different platoons. Okay, and that's my first example of this faction creation process. It's one thing to make all of these groups. It's another to make these subgroups and the competing groups. So I said, okay, the military is probably going to come into play quite a bit. So I'll make two platoons. So right away you're confronted with, how do I make them unique, distinct, and different, right? These sub-factions, you have to take one thing and segregate it and lean it apart. So I made the Piranha platoon. They are the ruthless side of the military. They're the guys who go in with the jackboots, just beating the local people down, taking away their rights, not caring at all, no empathy, no sympathy. uh, and to such a degree that even within their own ranks, like they don't even like each other. That's how vicious these people are. And it's very segregated in Piranha Platoon. You got the veterans who stayed alive, and the rookies who the veterans just don't care about. Throw them to the wolves. If you survive, you survive. If you don't survive, get out of my way. So this vicious group here, like the worst side of the military. And then on the other side, we have Crocodile Platoon. Again, this is a water world, so we have to have the fishy, the amphibious names going on. But Crocodile Platoon, they're kind of the more virtuous, the more defensive, the more nurturing side of the military. So they're going to protect the people. They're going to protect their own members, so the rookies gain experience instead of dying off quickly. They're going to have a much more safe defensive strategy. So in combat, they're going to not leave anybody behind. They're not going to rush in to an ambush, to a trap. Very slow, very steady, very controlled. They're the real professionals. Now again, each group has strengths and weaknesses. Piranha Platoon might have high casualty rate. And they might be reckless, they might be hard to get along with, but they're fast. They get the job done. They go in, any means necessary. They never pull out till it's done. They're going to fight and fight and fight. And if they lose half their men, that's fine with them. Whereas Crocodile Platoon, they're slower. They're not going to be as good at taking some of these fortified installations quickly. And if their casualties start to get up, they might pull back. They might even retreat at a certain point, right? So as the military commander, you got these two groups to balance. As the players, you got these two groups that you can play off against each other, get the rivalry going on, and just think about who are you dealing with today. So that's one example. So the military. Religion, not very important for this campaign. None of the characters are religious. The plot is not very religious. So I've made very few religious NPCs for this setting. Crime, big element, because one of our players is a gangster. He wants to take over the underworld of Haven, of the megacity. So I've made 3 competing gangs, and again, I've leaned them apart. So we've got the dirty, ruthless brawlers down in the slums. They'll recruit anyone. They'll rough people up, shake people down. Then we've got the high class gang. They're out in like the touristy areas. They have brothels, casinos. They have high class prostitution. They have all kinds of designer drugs, all kinds of things that the lower class gang doesn't have the capital to get. And because they have all these these products, these great products for sale, they need salesmen. They've got smooth, slick operators, con artists, prostitutes, pimps going in there, and really approaching people diplomatically. So they're really easy to deal with. Now they need some military asset, in terms of enforcers, in terms of assassins, but comparing the enforcers of one group to the other, it's like these guys in the slums will, they're really serious. They're really down in it. So each one again has its own strengths and weaknesses, just to make them different, to set them apart. They don't get along with each other. They fucking hate each other just as much as they're gonna hate when our player character comes in. So he's gonna be able to play them off against each other. I've also made this a middle class kind of gang. So they've got a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. So the guys who aren't quite slick enough to make the upper class group, and the guys who aren't quite ruthless enough to make the lower class group, they're going to kind of come together. You have to lower their standards, but they end up with a lot more people. So they have a lot of people to draw on in their gang. They don't have the best people, but they've got a lot of them. So they don't have the best brawlers or the best talkers, but they've got a lot of resources to draw upon. So they're, this real middle of the road, we're going to find our niches wherever those are. We're going to make it work. So, and they might be the most interesting to deal with in terms of how they're going to develop as characters. It's one thing to have a really strong character off the bat, one way or the other. It's another thing to have this character, and it's like we'll explore this character and we'll see how he evolves in the course of play. Maybe he'll be more ruthless than I thought, maybe more charming, more philosophical, um, more money-minded, perhaps a real businessman. So we've got some room left, and now all three of those crime factions are in our political web. The police are in there, uh, and the police, of course, have their own opinions, but that's the web. I just wanted to talk about how to make these groups and subgroups, and that is to lean them apart from one another. So have what you need, what the detail level is going to be, and when you're getting really granular about it, just lean them apart. Even within the individual gangs, you could just say, in the context of the gang, of the ruthless gang, for example, this guy is more ruthless. That guy is less ruthless. This guy is more experienced. That guy is less. Contrast them against each other. When characters are made in a vacuum, they all tend to be kind of middle of the road. Not always, but it's a tendency that I see a lot. Whereas if you make a character in context, you can have these degrees, these shades, this matrix, if you will. So that's just kind of what I wanted to ramble about, is how I do things, is to look at the big picture and then get granular, zoom in, and say, okay, how is this gang different from that gang? Oh, okay, one's a businessman, one's a philosopher, one's a dreamer, one's practical. And then come in and say, okay, within the gang of dreamers, which one is the most dreamy? Which one is the most practical of the dreamers? Have these layers, and of course then get the connections. Who's got police connections? Who's got connections in the mayor's office? But again, that's the political web, which is a video I've done some time ago. So that's pretty much my ramble. Lean things apart from each other, contrast them against each other, have lots and lots of detail where you need it. Where you don't need it, don't worry about it. I've done nothing for religion because I don't think it's really going to come up in this campaign. And if it does, I can improvise it. But I don't want to improvise everything because it'll be less realistic, it'll have less context, less subtext. Subtext is what's really, really important. So let me know in the comments below, how do you do factions? Is there a checklist that you use? Which factions do you include? How do you make them different? How much prep do you do? I look forward to your responses. I hope it was helpful. Until I see you again, good day and good gaming.